Indie Comic Union presents The Quilt, a collaboration between the comic makers of the Union, an original story set upon the dying patchwork world of The Quilt. Join us on the adventure, not just in the comic, but in the making of it, on YouTube, Instagram, and at IndieComicUnion.com. Welcome back to the Indie Comic Union presents The Quilt, a collaborative comic that we are working on with participating members of the Indie Comic Union. Our last meeting ran so long that we chopped it in half so that we can spend this time just discussing panel layouts and how we're going to accomplish that as a group. So thank you for joining us. Let's jump right back in. Because our vision when John and I started breaking it down was how are we going to make this so that it shows up well on Instagram and does all those things that we wanted to just mention, talking about show up on the website, show up on YouTube, show up on Instagram. And we realized the old-fashioned Jack Kirby layouts, those pages with just six squares, works really well. It's Instagram friendly. It's easy for doing something like these collabs, because if we do full page layouts, bam, they just stack all up. It assembles really well, and yet it's still flexible. Like you look at that first panel on this page, and it's basically the two squares smashed together to do a more landscape scenic presentation. And so that just works. And Drew, you brought Eric Larson's modular approach to mind before we started the video. Did you want to talk about this for a minute?
Yeah, he had something interesting that he's done a few times throughout the run of Savage Dragon, where he's, this one in particular was from number 64, I think, and it was something that also ran in Comic Shop News. So when it was running in Comic Shop News, he was doing it in sort of a landscape format that went across the page, but he was also able to rearrange these panels so that they would fit into the standard comic book size page. And I thought that kind of thing is really interesting. It has a lot of potential for what we might be doing here.
Oh yeah.
If you look at it, you could break this page into about 3 Instagram squares if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And so that's also a possibility.
Yeah, and that's really true, because if you like this right here, that's one square. And if you had that bit of story, you could still take the Insta square, break it down into that pair of panels that still fits into the Insta square, still goes easily into the same format on website and everything.
Yeah, and it's an experiment that he did again with, I think it was number 190, where it was basically the same kind of arrangement, except you could take those panels and put them into a smaller page.
Yeah.
So, those kinds of things are really interesting. I think we could do a lot with this kind of idea.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure who of us may be better at implementing it. I know that I in particular would have a really hard time, like in the moment, trying to plan out something like this if I were the one doing it.
Yeah. But this one's pretty good, because if
I can enter.
What's that?
Oh, I was just going to say that I have a lot of familiarity posting just square panels onto Instagram. So that's this is sort of some territory that I've done some stuff with this.
Maybe what we should do, we'll tap Brian
to
make a kind of layout guide or something. You make some thumbnails and stuff, and we can post it on the website.
Yeah.
And go forward with something like that. And the same article, I'll post these examples, and in the Discord, as you guys see awesome examples of somebody building something based on squares. Like I know there's an old Matt Wagner Grendel story that was posted in the in between his major stories, and the whole thing was just done on little tiny squares with a little blurb underneath it that told the narrative story to it. But the whole sequence was all just little squares and then writing below it from a narrator. And it wasn't the best story, but the technique was stuck with me, and I liked it. I always thought, oh, that's unique. I would like to do something like that. And so those are the kind of experiments that eventually, once we all feel comfortable, I know how we operate. We go from, oh, let's just do this little thing, to boom, let's just start doing this crazy thing that gets crazier and crazier and has more elements. And somehow we manage to keep it all together. So why not do that?
So what's the next step as far as organizing everything?
Oh, okay. The next step that John and I thought of was, well, we need some kind of visual development sessions. And so I'm really scared about just throwing a big calendar out for everybody. But what I want to do is just have a bunch of little meetings where we get together on Magma or on Zoom so that we can draw things together and we hash out ideas on a certain topic. The first one will be tomorrow with that barbarian draw jam. And I'm not even really preparing for it at this point. I'm just going to go in with some of the art that John's bringing. And I just know you guys, you'll have ideas and it'll just explode. You're like, what if we do this? And like just having a conversation with John, and he said, talking about Aponon, that character, the leader of the barbarians that he created. And he said, their civilization's in decline, but she just wants to relight the elements of her culture. And we're talking about, I have to write that down, relight the elements of the culture. And right there, a whole element that I know I want to work into the dialogue came just from having that conversation. So I'm hoping that if we have 6 or 7 meetings like this over the next couple of weeks leading into February, that there's just going to be all this inspiration that happens and we'll just know what these characters are going to look like.
So we're clear, it is Aponon?
Oh, yeah, it's good. I cut it out, but there's a whole thing of, John says a Panon or Aponon. I think we're open to either. I mean, this isn't, we're not making a Pixar film, so no one's going to actually speak it. I think we can say it either way. I naturally say Aponon, and I think John, his first instinct is to
That's
say
the way I
Aponon.
would say it.
You'd say a Panon?
No.
Aponon? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we'll, he doesn't really care. We're not even really set on names and things, or we were talking aloud a couple weeks ago. Should she be green? You know, should we do something a little more dystopian and alien in her look? So all that's up in the air for tomorrow, just like all the other sessions we want to do. Everything's up in the air. It's all how we want to bring our insight into this.
Oh, I know you would wanted to talk to me a little while ago about the smaller characters.
Oh yeah. And
so I'm not sure if you just wanted to try doing that right now with everybody here, and everybody can kind of jam a little bit on the ideas behind these guys, or
we'll wrap up. It sounds like we're kind of running out of question momentum. We'll wrap up by talking a little bit about that, but I did want to get together and have a special meeting where I have seen Matt brought some art to me, and Kevin Curley has brought some art to me that suggested some of the characters that haven't been done yet. And then Thunk, we totally made sure not to design the character that goes from being a protector to dying to turning into a magic mace. We got to figure out how to draw a mace that was once a character. So we can talk about it because that sounds really fun to get a little.
So the first thing that comes to mind when you discuss Thunk, and I don't know if anybody else gets this, but the first thing I think of is Ben Grimm.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so I think something along those lines might work really well, because then you could have that kind of texture to his look while still having, some recognizable element. It doesn't necessarily have to be a rocky texture, but I was thinking maybe even something like a lumpy metal kind of texture.
Yeah.
And I was thinking he should have a big head. That way, that's what makes
the mace
the Thunk. Yeah, the mace head.
Yeah.
I was thinking the way I pictured it, because I drew him, being held as the mace this morning. The way I was picturing it was more like Mike Wazowski from Monsters, Inc. And the legs, coiled, like with long legs, and it coiled together to make the handle. I drew it with the one eye on it.
And those ideas could actually mash together. Like Drew, when you said the thing, like Ben Grimm, I imagined we could have that moment where the bruised black rises up and smashes down upon it. And that could break apart an outer shell that would be like the Ben Grimm kind of shell, revealing just what's like his skeleton or the core of the mace inside. And then that would allow for a panel that has this detritus of what was once his more complete body, leaving behind just that Mike Wazowski kind of character laying there that they come in and mourn. And then Aponon or a Panon comes and grabs and picks up, and it just
She just like punches through his body and pulls it out.
Transform.
Oh, they're all sitting there crying, and she's like,
yeah.
"Fuck yeah!"
Yeah, so there's a lot of potential to how that would work out.
Just from designs, Tar, I feel, is the heart of the group. If there is any heart, it's Tar so far. Especially with his little backpack, and he doesn't look very threatening.
Yeah.
I think even though Apana, is that what her name is?
Yeah,
Apanon.
Yeah. It's open at this point.
She's got that she's got that like strong royalty. So if people would assume that she would be the leader, but I think Tar should be the leader.
Like Wind in the Willows was a huge influence, and so Rat and Mole was kind of the Sliver and Tar kind of dynamic of just these two kind of characters that have always just lived within the structure of their life, and all of a sudden the world becomes a cruel place, and they have to kind of explore adversity or deal with other things out in the world because they get forced on a walkabout. And it's about as far as I let myself think about them. And that meeting that Drew is talking about should still happen, because what I was hoping to do was bring in the 5 kind of personalities of those characters, as I just kind of made a sort of temperature chart of, well, this character represents fear, this character represents hope, that kind of thing. So we'll have a meeting and we'll nail down what everybody thinks they should be, and maybe some insight into how we can develop these characters.
What I had thought of with them, it kind of seemed to me like Sliver and Tar kind of had some sort of elemental kind of ideas to them. And so just going with like the really obvious archetypes with that, if you're going to have a set of 5 characters, then, you might have like a metal guy or a rock guy, a fire guy, that kind of thing. And, I mean, it might be a little too obvious, but it's also recognizable. And sometimes that's an easy in for people who are on the outside.
Myths make it easy to collaborate. We all know the feel of a myth, and anything that streamlines this process. I mean, the reason I love comics is because they are the modern representation of myth. We break myths in movies in the modern age, and books are deconstructions of mythology, but comics, the actual physical comics, paper, where our stories are told, and web comics too, that's the place where myths are still allowed to exist. Those stories aren't critiqued and ripped apart and made non-mythical like everything else is. Even Star Wars we think of as a modern myth, but really they're deconstructing the myth nowadays with that. Comics didn't do that. So we're defenders of that. So I think we should stick with those tropes and build something cool around it. I mean, that's what I want to champion above all things, is keep mythology productive and alive like that.
Give it a purpose.
Yeah.
And if we go that direction with the 5 elements for the 5 little critters, what's that mysterious 6th element that's going to be ignited later on, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. John and I struggled with how do we make this story so it doesn't give away surprises as we talk about it on YouTube every week. But we realized it's about the creative process and less about the actual story. And I think we're in a modern audience where people will enjoy the story in addition to enjoying us talking about how to create it. And on that note of giving things away, we had talked about Thunk being this key in the end, this key that is going to be able to close up that wound in the void out there in space. And so there's this destiny that gets kicked off with Apanon finding the key that's going to allow her to fulfill her destiny and mourn the loss of all of her people, and also give Thunk purpose. So Thunk is not just a mace, he's some kind of interstellar key that's going to put the kibosh on the gods and the primordial forces' big evil plan. So, and if that's not giving anything away, I don't know what is. But it's good because we're talking about building something that we can build that in and foreshadow it right now as everybody takes turns writing these characters and doing interesting things with them.
I don't know if anyone else agrees with that whole thing about the elements. I think it definitely makes characterization a bit easier too, because then, like Bradley was saying, you already have those tropes that you can kind of work off of. Like you already kind of have your pre-assumed notions of what a fire guy is going to be like, or a wind person or something like that, and you can kind of work back and forth with that accordingly.
So what are these 5 elements? Earth, air, fire, water, and the ether?
Well, that's what we'll have to talk about.
Quick question.
Right, no, heart is the 5th one.
Sort of going to the element idea, is there anything with crystals? Because I sort of had like I had an idea that I thought would be pretty cool in terms of like world building for future stories, sort of plotting ahead. But I just want to make sure before I do that there's not like already a character whose core elemental theme is crystal.
No, not yet. But it's easy. Like tar is supposed to be inside of them. I haven't even decided genders. I purposely tried to step back and go, is gender even necessary with the characters? So I've tried not to assign gender. I think every once in a while I've messed up in the script because I wanted that to be a conversation. Is it necessary and things? But inside of tar, they are a container and always worried about their container cracking or breaking. But there's an unknowable essence inside of tar, and that could definitely be a mystery that we carry on with, and it could end up being crystal as the 5th thing or something like that. So there's all sorts of mysteries. Yeah.
Well, one thing I had thought about as far as crystal was crystalline was that after the bruised black would sweep through an area, it would like consume all the individualism of it. So like say, each part of the quilt has a different architecture or whatever, but when the bruised black moves through, what's left is like this parched crystalline skeleton, and they all look the same.
So Robbie, you need to lead the meeting on the bruised black because clearly you have lots of ideas about what the villain thing is going to be.
That's pretty funny because I had a really sort of similar idea to that with like crystal enemies. So
right on. What you want to elaborate on that, or is that something you're using in your own stuff?
No, just like a general idea building this. I thought it'd be pretty important to like have some general concepts that everyone could sort of use for whether it's plot, convenience, or stories. I almost thought, I mean, the idea of the stormtrooper it's a pretty great idea in general in fiction. And I sort of thought of like, if this entire world is just like a mishmash of worlds initially, like, what if there's one world where they're crystalline beings who they grow naturally, but the way that they sort of like adapt to this world is they almost become like this a border patrol almost, where it's like these like crystalline soldiers who rise up out of the
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And I think
who just want to separate everything and actually like they're stormtroopers, so you could kill them without feeling bad because they're not living beings. At the same time, though, they're like just like a wholly evil enemy that just wants to keep everyone stuck where they are, I guess.
Oh yeah, I've got crystals and stormtroopers, and as I'm making notes here, we are going to let's break that out into a whole other bruised black kind of get together, and we'll nail that down at a time when we can actually be.
The bruised black is conformity.
Yeah.
I imagine something kind of like a Venom symbiote, except without all the venomness.
So we just wanted something that everybody could put something into, and we were hoping that it will be such a mashup that the answer is just yes to Venom, yes to crystals, yes to conformity. Just make it just this absorption of all that stuff. And
I mean, someone else might even think of it as being like a bunch of gears or something like that. I could see that as being a really interesting take on it.
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of black gears.
Yeah, like something underneath the tar. Yeah, it could be anything underneath that covering.
Well, my idea was just that if it's like a parasitic thing, it would adapt to its scenario. So that's why it may be the same idea but look differently. So.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a lot to think about and a lot to move forward. We'll continue some of our discussions on Discord. I'll continue posting some of the scripts on indiecomic.union.com, and we will get these videos up on YouTube. Looks like we have enough for at least 2 videos at this point, based on the conversations that are going on here. And I hope you guys can join me for the Barbarian Draw Jam tomorrow. I'm really excited because John will be there too, and he has so much enthusiasm for the Starbreakers and what 70s sci-fi in decline is going to be like. So I'm hoping at least some of us will be there to make that one happen.
Well, since John's going to be there, I mean.
It's just been fun working with him because it's been just us, and we've been enthusiastic. But the whole time we've been talking, wait till they see this, and I hope they actually want to do this. And our doubts and our joy have all been intertwining, and now to see everybody jumping on board, it's really, really nice.
So, how many things did you guys hope that we wanted to see that we didn't care about?
Nothing so far, because we're just trying to get it out there. So far, it seems like everything we produce is like, yes, let's do this. We're overall a group of pretty positive people that are full of ideas and just willing to go for it. So that bodes well for weird ideas like this. So why don't we say goodbye to everybody out there at YouTube, and we'll fade out here at this point. But before we
I thought you were going to single somebody out. Why don't we say goodbye to Robbie right now, because we're tired of listening to him.
Shoo, get out, Robbie. But we do need Connor to jump in with our outro, because it wouldn't be right.
Well, as it's been said before, and it's been said many times, that everyone should like and should subscribe right now to the Indie Comics Union. Or really, are you really a comics fan? Are you truly a comics fan? Let's gatekeep everything. Everything comics, not just indie comics. Everything comics. If you're not subscribed to the Indie Comics Union.
Right on. That was a good one. That was a little more long and winding. Last time you had a lot of menace to it.